The series begins with a group of girls on a flight headed to the Hawaiian Islands. It's a special trip designed for teenage girls who are going through emotional and psychological struggles. And the purpose of the trip is to help them become more mature and develop better ways of thinking. The woman in charge of the trip appears on a screen inside the plane, telling them that the journey is completely free of men and that it will change their lives for the better. On the plane, a girl named Shelby tries to get everyone to be friendly with one another. The story then shifts to Leah, who is in an interrogation room, telling investigators what happened to them during the trip with a trauma therapist present to help her open up. Leah describes the moment when the plane was violently shaken, and each girl thought it was the final moment of her life. Some prayed to God, some smoked a cigarette, others listened to music, and one hugged her best friend. Leah, however, did the strangest thing imaginable. She kept reading her favorite book while thinking about her ex-boyfriend. We then go back to the time when Leah was still in school, listening to a lecture by a former graduate named Jeffrey, who was talking about the nature of women and their emotions. Suddenly, the teacher comes in and asks Leah to give Jeffrey a ride home because she's in a hurry. Leah agrees, and since she's writing a report about Jeffrey's book, she takes the opportunity to ask him for help. Leah grows closer to Jeffrey, and it becomes clear that they're attracted to each other. Days pass, and Leah keeps in touch with him constantly until the day she tells him that her 18th birthday is near, wanting to make their relationship official. They start dating, but one day, Jeffrey shows up at Leah's house and tells her she's just a child, and that she lied to him because someone sent him her birth certificate by email. That means two things. First, someone knew about their relationship. And second, she's still 17, which means he could be charged for being involved with a minor. He asks her not to contact him again and leaves, breaking her heart. Leah collapses emotionally after losing the only person she loved. And because of her depression, her parents decide to send her on the Hawaii trip. Back in the present, Leah continues telling investigators about waking up in the middle of the ocean after the crash, where she saw one of the other girls, Jeanette, completely exhausted and in pain. Leah noticed that Jeanette was suffering from internal bleeding. Suddenly, Leah spotted an island in the distance, so she carried Jeanette and swam toward it. There. The rest of the girls had survived the crash and found each other. They saw Leah and Jeanette in the water and ran to help them, but Jeanette suddenly stopped breathing. Leah asked if anyone knew how to perform CPR, and luckily the group did. They managed to save Jeanette, who thanked Leah in particular for rescuing her in the sea. Another girl, Martha, discovered that her legs were injured. So, Shelby helped her and tried to comfort her. Shelby then decided that they needed to search for food resources before anything else. She went to explore the island alone, but Tony volunteered to join her. It turned out that Shelby had experience in hunting and surviving in the wild because of the trip she used to take with her father. The two of them kept walking around the island in search of fresh water. Because Tony was Martha's closest friend, she felt jealous of how much Martha liked Shelby after she helped her. Out of anger, Tony decided to push Shelby off a small hill, causing her to fall hard to the ground. Tony apologized and left her there. But a while later, Shelby returned to the beach with the others, pretending nothing had happened and not mentioning what Tony did. The girls then decided to look for any food or water supplies that might have fallen from the plane. They found a large stash of Pepsi cans and fought and discovered her waterproof bag. Luckily, her clothes were still dry. Suddenly, one of their phones caught a signal. So, they decided they had to make one call, just one, to someone who could actually save them. But each girl wants to call the person she knows without thinking. And the battery runs out while they're arguing with each other. Suddenly, Jeanette collapses to the ground, bleeding from her nose, and her life ends there. The group breaks down over Jeanette's death and decides to bury her. Leah continues talking with the investigator and says she's going to tell him something she's never told anyone before. After everyone fell asleep, she heard the sound of a phone, and she was the only one who heard it. The shocking part was that it was in Jeanette's pocket the whole time. What's strange is that Jeanette never mentioned she had a phone. But instead of calling someone who could actually help them, she decided to listen to her boyfriend Jeffrey's voice. Before she could say anything other than her name, the phone died. Leah asks the investigator if Jeffrey reported that she tried to contact him after the news of the crash, and she learns that he never told anyone because he was afraid for himself. Leah is devastated to realize that he literally sacrificed her life to save his own. Then the scene shifts to the headquarters of the company responsible for the flight, The woman in charge, Kleena, arrives and is told by her assistant that Jeanette has died. Klein is shocked and rushes into a large control room filled with surveillance screens, revealing that there are hidden cameras all over the island monitoring the girls. It turns out that the plane crash and everything happening on the island were all part of a pre-planned experiment, except for Jeanette's death, which wasn't supposed to happen. The company staff assume Klein will shut down the mission, but she decides to continue. Her assistants obey without question, and the company sends an agent named Ethan with a bag containing medicine and food, which he drops at a short distance from the island. The girls find the bag and think it belongs to the pilot after discovering his ID inside. Back at the FBI interrogation center, it's now Rachel's turn to be questioned. The investigator asks her about her twin sister, Nora, who was with her on the same trip. Rachel tearfully recounts her story before the trip. During the time she was preparing for the national swimming competition, since childhood, she had been a champion, and her parents always expected her to reach the Olympics and earn a scholarship to Stanford University. But contrary to expectations, during her teenage years, her body became much heavier than before. Her coach talked to her about her body type, saying it could never be athletic because it accumulated fat too easily. The coach even showed her pictures of other athletes whose bodies were naturally lean and muscular. Rachel was shocked. She had spent her whole life training and knew nothing else, but she pretended not to care, eating in front of her parents and then forcing herself to vomit afterward. She developed an eating disorder, became dehydrated, and was hospitalized. Despite that, Rachel kept pushing herself to lose even more weight. When the day of the competition came, Nora checked on her before the event, and Rachel reassured her and told her to leave. It was clear Nora loved her sister deeply. Rachel walked out, knowing she wasn't well, performed her pre-swim routine, but collapsed and started bleeding in the water. Rachel recalls seeing in her parents' eyes the same look they gave Nora, a normal, ordinary look. While she had always been the hero, the daughter who drew admiration from them, Nora, on the other hand, didn't care about fame. All she wanted was for her sister to be healthy and happy. She tried to convince Rachel to accept reality, so she wouldn't keep living in an illusion she could never achieve. Rachel says she always fought with her sister, thinking Nora lived in her shadow, but she eventually realized Nora had always been protecting her from the world. Rachel raises her arm, now missing a hand, and says she can still feel Nora's touch, holding her hand and telling her everything would be okay. Back on the island, Leah suggests that the group climb to the highest point to attract the attention of passing planes. They're convinced that someone must be looking for them. So Leah, Rachel, and Shelby go together, while Nora follows behind them out of fear for her sister. Dot gives them a mirror they can use to signal planes for help, and Rachel takes the mirror and leads the group since she's the only athlete among them. Along the way, Shelby becomes exhausted and wants tourist, but Rachel insists they're almost there. Shelby can't continue and sits on the ground, which makes Rachel lose her temper. She gets so angry that she throws the mirror. Leah quickly jumps to catch it, but can't reach it and nearly falls from a great height. Shelby and Nora manage to pull her back to safety, while Rachel stands frozen, unable to move. Afterward, Rachel argues with them angrily, saying she has a future waiting for her and that she's just stressed out. But now that the mirror is gone, there's no point in staying on the mountain. They decide to go back down and look for another way to signal for help. Meanwhile, at the company, Klein watches the live feed and notices that her staff are upset with her because of Jeanette's death. She tells them the reason they continued the mission was so Jeanette's death wouldn't be in vain. Then, she asks her assistant to confirm that the supply bag arrived safely, and they watch the girls distributing the medicine and helping each other. Back at the interrogation room, Dot begins telling her story, how her life led her to the trip. She talks about her father, who used to be a football coach before. He developed a severe lung disease that left him unable to move, relying on machines to breathe. Since his condition was terminal, the doctors advised that he stay at home with his family. A nurse named Matthew was assigned to care for him while Dot was at school. Matthew seemed to like Dot and tried to help her whenever he could. Dot took care of her father as best she could, helping him bathe and go to the bathroom. Her father, however, was emotionally broken, feeling helpless and guilty that his daughter had to give up her youth and happiness to care for him. When Christmas came, he gave Dot a gift, a ticket for the Hawaii trip, but she refused, saying she could never leave him. One day, her father's illness reached its final stage. He couldn't bear the pain anymore and asked Dot to give him an injection that would end his suffering. He was determined to take it, and she couldn't deny him his final wish. He passed away in her arms. 2 days later, Matthew came to check on her and handed her a card belonging to a woman who could help her avoid the child welfare services until she turned 18. He told her it was her father's last request, and that he had promised to make sure she called the woman. Dot did call her to ask how she could help. Back on the island, Dot and Shelby search for a cave to take shelter in from the rain, while Nora, Rachel, and Leah go together to where the plane wreckage leaves underwater, hoping to find something that could help them communicate with the outside world. Rachel is the best swimmer among them, while Leah isn't as skilled. But the two dive down to the wreck and find the black box, which contains recordings of everything that happened before and during the crash. Nora tells them that the black box is crucial for locating their position if they can get it to work. Rachel and Leah dive again to pull it out, but Leah can't hold her breath long enough and keeps resurfacing for air. Rachel gets frustrated and tells her they need to get back before sunset. During their final dive, Leah tries to surface for air as usual, but Rachel becomes so angry that she grabs her violently and nearly drowns her. Meanwhile, Dot and Shelby are walking through the island when Dot confides in Shelby that her boyfriend has been cheating on her. Shelby doesn't believe it, gets upset, and walks away. Moments later, Shelby screams for help. Dot runs toward her and finds a snake about to attack. Dot kills the snake and saves Shelby's life. She then admits she's not sure if the cheating rumor is true and that it might just be gossip. We flash back to Dot's school days, where she secretly sold some of her father's prescription painkillers to classmates for extra money. Dot sees Shelby's boyfriend doing drugs and finds him with another girl. She's deeply upset by his betrayal, especially because Shelby is kind and beautiful and doesn't deserve it. Back in the interrogation room, Dot explains that she met the woman she had spoken to on the phone, the one who promised to protect her from social services. The woman offered to pay for Dot's trip and make sure child welfare stayed away from her. Dot says she immediately knew there would be a price to pay because nothing in life comes for free. Back on the island, the girls are trying to enjoy themselves swimming in the ocean when they suddenly spot a bag of chips floating in the water. They start arguing about who should get it. So, they decide to hold a contest. The winner gets the chips. They split into 2 teams, and whichever team manages to build a shelter first will win. Both teams try to work together, but the challenge reveals the more aggressive and emotionally unstable personalities among them. In the first group, Rachel is the one who always wants to be in control, while Leah can't stand Fatin because she invaded her privacy by reading her ex-boyfriend's book and the letters he wrote. Fatin had mocked Leah for dating a man in his 30s, so Leah decides to take revenge by treating her with open hostility until she finally loses control, shoves her onto the wooden platform, and starts a heated fight. Leah yells at Fatin, strips off her clothes, and dives into the water in frustration. The rest of the girls are shocked by her behavior and start to think she might have a mental illness. In the second group, Tony's temper becomes a major problem. During her interrogation, she admits that her excessive anger causes trouble for everyone around her. She breaks things, lashes out, and can't control herself. During the challenge, Tony loses her temper again, frustrated that Martha keeps talking about Shelby and how much Shelby helped her. Nora notices Tony struggling to tie the wooden beams because of her nerves and offers to help. But Tony explodes in anger, destroying everything they built. Her selfishness causes her team to lose, and Martha, deeply hurt, tells her she's tired of constantly forgiving her mistakes and doesn't want to be her friend anymore. Back at the interrogation, Fatin tells her story from before the crash. She comes from a wealthy, conservative Indian family, and her mother forced her to play the cello because of her talent. But Fatin wanted to live a freer life filled with parties and relationships. Her father was more lenient as she reminded him of his younger self. One day, he asked her to check something on his iPad related to an auction, but she accidentally discovered messages from multiple girls and realized her father was cheating on her mother with more than 10 different women, all teenagers. Shocked and disgusted, Fatin decided to expose him publicly, ruining his social reputation. When the truth came out, her family found out she was behind it, and they decided to send her on the Hawaii trip, claiming her presence was tearing the family apart. Back on the island, Leah's team wins the contest, and they all sit together in the hut they built, sharing food. Later, Fatin asks for some soda since she's run out, But Leah snaps at her, saying it's not their fault she doesn't know how to manage her supplies. Hurt and embarrassed, Fatine leaves the hut to sleep alone. In the middle of the night, thirsty and restless, she sneaks back, steals some soda from the others, and walks away. The next morning, the group discovers that Fatine is missing. Panic spreads, and then Tony returns from the forest, saying she found a torn piece of Fatine's pants with blood on it. Everyone grows anxious, and they decide to search for her. As usual, Leah and Rachel argue again, this time about Rachel mocking Leah's boyfriend's book. Rachel storms off to search in another direction with Martha following her. Along the way, Rachel suddenly falls into a pit of mud and can't climb out. The others hear her screams, rush to help, and together manage to pull her out. Everyone is exhausted and wants to return to camp, but Leah insists they can't go back until they find Phaetons. Leah is the only one determined to keep searching for Phaeton, even though she still dislikes her. They keep moving through the forest until Phaeton suddenly appears in front of them. Each girl yells at her out of fear and frustration, but Phaeton asks them to calm down and leads them to a freshwater lake. The group is thrilled and considers her their savior. Efton apologizes to Leah for being rude, and they reconcile and become friends. Meanwhile, Cleen is contacting the families of each girl. Leah's parents call to check on her, and Cleen praises Leah's progress, saying she has made new friends and is becoming a better person, assuring them that she'll return home completely changed. Everything happening on the island serves Klein's agenda. She promotes the project as a therapeutic retreat for troubled girls, offering activities and bonding experiences when in reality it's a psychological experiment studying how rebellious girls change their behavior after experiencing hardship. Back on the island at night, the girls hear terrifying animal sounds. Dot explains that if they leave Janet's body too close to their camp, predators will smell it and attack them. They decide to move the body elsewhere and start digging, but the body is gone. Each girl offers her own theory about what happened, but the only logical one is that the tide must have taken it away. Everyone goes to sleep except Leah, who tells Phaeton she doesn't believe the tide explanation. Share members Jeanette's hidden phone, the sudden appearance of the medicine bag, and now the missing body. Leah feels everything is connected somehow, but she can't figure out how. Back at the interrogation facility, it's revealed that everything is staged. The girls are actually being held in a building that has nothing to do with the police. Klein herself arranged for the investigator and the psychologist to play their roles, pretending to be part of the girls' recovery phase. The setup also ensures that none of the girls will report anything after they're released. Klein's strategy is to keep them isolated from one another, so they won't compare stories or uncover the truth. Each girl is made to believe she's being genuinely interrogated. That night, the psychologist visits Leah privately and tries to get her to talk more about her emotions. Leah opens up about the most traumatic event she's experienced. Meanwhile, back on the island, Rachel successfully catches a large batch of oysters, and the group eats together except for Shelby, who's vegetarian. Suddenly, everyone becomes sick with food poisoning. Shelby does her best to help, but suddenly disappears. Dot and Leah are the least affected, so Dot asks Leah to fetch the medicine bag from the forest. Leah retrieves it, but then spots Shelby walking toward an unfamiliar area. She drops the bag to follow her, not realizing it's not properly secured, and all the medicine spills out. Leah loses track of Shelby and returns to the bag, finding the pills scattered everywhere. She cries as she tries to gather them. When Cher returns to Dot, Dot checks the pills and realizes that the medicine she needs only had 2 tablets, but now there's just 1 left. Martha and Tony are the sickest. Tony is on the brink of death, so Dot gives her the pill and she starts to recover. Later that night, Martha's condition worsens, and Leah, terrified, confesses that she dropped the pills in the forest and they might still find them. Dot gets furious, scolding Leah for being cowardly and only admitting it now. They go back together to search for the medicine and manage to save Martha. Back in the staged facility, the psychologist analyzes Leah's behavior, deliberately trying to make her afraid so she won't report what happened. Her hints that their experiment could be seen as an indirect crime, successfully intimidating her. He then tells Leah she suffers from obsessive thinking and paranoia, meaning her imagination is so strong that it rejects logical explanations and instead creates irrational ones. This becomes clear when Leah starts believing that Shelby is secretly plotting something. And she also becomes convinced that her old friend was the one who sent Jeffrey her birth certificate and ruined her life. Leah gets upset, loses control, and tells the psychologist that she feels judged and uncomfortable. She grows increasingly angry, pushes him, and a nurse rushes in to sedate her with an injection. We then flash back to when Klein was preparing everything for her experiment. She was looking for someone to join the project and live among the girls to monitor them closely. By coincidence, she met a graduate student named Leanne, who was working on her PhD at the university. Klein was impressed by her and invited her to participate in the experiment. Klein's assistant created a complete fake identity for Leanne, including childhood memories, social media accounts and photos, and gave her a new name, Jeanette Leanne. Now Jeanette became the same woman who would later die on the island. At that point, Klein launched the experiment. They staged the plane crash, placed the girls in boats, and set them adrift near the island. Leanne Jeanette looked at them and began to realize how unethical the whole project was. She decided to withdraw, but Matthew tried to stop her. During the struggle, she accidentally fell into the water and hit her head on a piece of wood. Although she appeared fine, she had actually suffered internal bleeding. That injury ultimately caused her death on the island. Back on the island, Martha regains consciousness and finds herself floating in the water. The storm had destroyed their hut, extinguished their fire, and washed away their supplies. Each girl tries to save whatever she can from the water, and suddenly, Rachel spots her sister Nora crying for help in the waves. At the same time, Rachel also sees the black box that could reveal their location. She chooses to save the box, leaving her sister to be rescued by someone else. The next day, everyone is tense and frightened. They've now been stranded for over 15 days, having lost everything they worked so hard to build. Dot feels hopeless and tells them that everyone has probably forgotten about them, that no one cares anymore, and she's ready to accept death. Shelby stands alone on a high hill when she spots 2 bags washed ashore, one belonging to Efton. They open the second bag and discover that it belonged to Jeanette. The girls are thrilled when they find alcohol, medicine, and other essentials inside. Leah, however, becomes furious, demanding to know how they can't see how suspiciously perfect this is. She points out that it's too convenient how every time they're in trouble, the exact supplies they need magically appear. She accuses Shelby of conspiring with someone, saying she's seen her sneaking off and disappearing at night. Shelby, humiliated, removes her false teeth and tells them that's what she's been hiding. She goes off to clean them so she can keep looking perfect. The rest of the group turns on Leah, calling her paranoid and unstable. Meanwhile, Kleina is preparing her presentation for the experiment's investors. Using slides and images, she showcases what the girls have gone through on the island. It becomes clear that Kleina is an extreme feminist obsessed with proving that women are more fit to lead the world than men. She claims that if women held power, there would be no wars or destruction, because by nature, they are less inclined to violence unlike men. She argues that her experiment proves this. Although the girls sometimes fought and displayed aggression, in the end they formed deep emotional bonds, overcame conflicts, and achieved moments of profound peace. Klein concludes her speech by saying that if one day someone asks what caused the end of the world, the answer will be simple. It was the refusal to adopt her experiment. Those who dismissed it as a failure are the ones who doomed the world to collapse under male destruction. Back on the island, Foten hears the sound of a plane. The girls look up and see it approaching. The pilot spots them and waves. The group bursts into tears of joy, screaming and celebrating, unable to believe they're finally being rescued. Everyone rejoices except for Shelby, who stands apart, visibly sad and emotionally distant. At the holding facility, Shelby begins talking about her life, explaining that she comes from a deeply religious Christian family with extremely strict and unreasonable rules, one of which demanded that she remain perfectly pure. That ideal conflicted with who she really was and what she felt, which she constantly tried to deny because of her upbringing and her family's beliefs. One day, Shelby confessed her attraction to her friend Ian, who then told her parents. Shelby was publicly shamed in church, and her family punished her severely, refusing to even speak to her afterward. Desperate to regain their approval, Shelby cut off contact with Aeon and told her parents that I had been the one who initiated everything. Ion, who was already struggling with mental health issues and had a history of suicidal thoughts, was devastated by Shelby's betrayal. After losing her closest friend, Ian took her own life. From that moment on, Shelby was never the same. She fell into a deep depression, and her parents eventually decided to send her on the Hawaii trip. On the island, Shelby is brushing her hair, but after so many days stranded, it has become tangled and ruined. Overwhelmed by mixed emotions and guilt, she breaks down and impulsively cuts off all her hair. That night, she sits alone until Leah approaches her, trying to comfort her. Leah stays by her side all night, and from that moment, they become very close friends. Back at the holding facility, Shelby refuses to continue, speaking unless she can see Leah. The investigator and the psychologist protests, but Shelby insists. Eventually, they give in and bring her to Leah. As soon as she sees her, Shelby hugs her tightly and slips a piece of paper into Leah's shirt. We return to the island 6 days after the group spotted the plane. Their hope has started to fade. They now believe the pilot never reported seeing them. Leah's paranoia takes over. She becomes convinced the pilot is part of the conspiracy and falls into a deep depression, convinced there's a plot against them. Meanwhile, Nora is fishing while Rachel stands nearby, but Rachel refuses to touch the water. She knows she'll never achieve her dream of swimming again or getting the Stanford scholarship. Nora takes her to a high ledge and urges her to jump into the sea, reminding her that swimming is her passion and she can't abandon it. Rachel refuses to even dip her feet in until she sees Leah drowning after trying to end her life. Rachel dives in and saves her. The group sedates Leah to calm her and help her sleep. At the same time, Martha, Shelby, and Tony are searching the island for food. They come across goat droppings and decide to hunt it, but Martha, being vegetarian, refuses to harm an animal. She argues with them and storms off to look for fruit on her own. Suddenly she sees the goat and hears Shelby and Tony nearby. She intentionally scares the goat away, and when Tony sees this, she gets furious, telling Martha that if they don't eat, they'll die, and that she clearly doesn't understand what it means to face death. The same death she'll be responsible for because of her stubbornness. Tony and Shelby leave to keep searching for the goat, while Martha stands alone, lost in painful memories. She remembers her childhood accident that left her unable to walk for a long time. Years later, she was summoned to testify in court against the doctor who treated her, who was later accused of sexually abusing his patients. Martha couldn't believe it. She was too kind, always seeing the good in people, and couldn't accept that he might have hurt her intentionally. Her mother suspected that something had indeed happened, but knew Martha's pure heart made it hard for her to face the truth. On the island, Martha remembers lying in court, saying the doctor never harmed her. And it becomes clear that she's still emotionally scarred by the abuse she repressed. Standing face to face with the goat, she finally decides to kill it, as if she's symbolically taking revenge on the doctor who violated her. Back at the isolation facility, the investigator is monitoring the girls through surveillance cameras. He becomes deeply affected by their psychological state and struggles to keep pretending. Klena enters and coldly mocks him, reminding him that she pays him a large sum of money and that she saved him from his life of addiction and alcoholism. Klena reminds the investigator that she made him play the role of the big brother figure he is now and orders him to pull himself together and continue the experiment. She tells him to go through the box containing the girls' personal items and journals from the island to find anything that could be used against them, something that would keep their families from reporting the truth. The investigator tells her that the only thing he found is that Martha lied under oath in court, which could be used as leverage. Klein thanks him coldly and leaves. Back on the island, Leah wakes up from the sedative and starts wandering aimlessly, lost in thought. Suddenly, she hears Nora talking near a tree, saying, "They promised me the food shortage wouldn't last and that none of them would be in danger because Leah's suicidal and could die at any moment." It becomes clear that Nora is speaking to the experiment staff through the hidden surveillance cameras. Leah appears behind her and accuses her of being part of the conspiracy, saying she's the reason all of this is happening. But Leah is still disoriented and barely conscious. So Nora takes advantage of it, telling her she's hallucinating because of the sedative and gently leads her away from the camera area. The next day, Nora sits by Leah's side until she wakes up. Leah wants to know what she remembers, but it turns out she recalls nothing from the night before. Exhausted and confused, Leah lies back down. Nora reassures her and later moves away from the group to write in her journal, noting that Leah doesn't remember anything. She holds the notebook towards the hidden camera so the company staff can see it and feel reassured. But then, in a new line, she secretly writes that she's not sure whether she can trust Leah or not. The staff watching the feed panic, worried that Leah might eventually expose the truth. Nora, terrified of what could happen, decides she has to make sure. She starts observing Leah constantly following her every move. Eventually, she sees Leah heading into the forest toward the area where one of the cameras is hidden. Nora pretends she's just walking through the woods and casually moves toward the same spot when she sees Leah approaching the camera. She calls out to distract her and leads her deeper into the forest. Leah follows her unaware of the trap. Suddenly, Leah falls into a deep pit in the ground. She screams for Nora to help, but Nora stands at the edge looking down at her. With a trembling voice, she apologizes and tells Leah that everything will be over soon, implying that this is the only way to keep the experiment from being exposed. Leah is shocked and keeps screaming, hoping someone will hear her. Then the story flashes back to when Nora was still in school and met a quiet, introverted boy named Dean, who reminded her of herself. They grew close and eventually started dating. One day, Nora introduced Dean to her sister Rachel, but Rachel told her he was strange and not right for her. Because her sister's opinion mattered more to her than her own, Nora decided to break up with him. Sometime later, she learned that Dean had died after being bullied at a boys' summer camp. Devastated, Nora decided to visit the boy responsible for Dean's death in prison. There, she met Kleena, who asked why she wanted to visit her son. Nora showed her a picture of Dean and said she wanted him to see the innocent soul he had destroyed. Klein told Nora that violent crimes like that happen every year in boy camps because of their obsession with the law of the jungle, the idea that the strong prey on the weak. She said these were the rules men love, the reason for the constant fear, chaos, and suffering in the world. Klein explained that men control everything. They judge women, limit them, and make them hate themselves, their bodies, their dreams, and their ambitions. She told Nora to imagine a world without men, ruled entirely by women. Nora was fascinated by Klein's words, and the two agreed to meet again. During their next meeting, Klein invited Nora to become her partner in the Hawaii experiment. After Nora asked her to help her sister learn to accept herself and choose a life that truly suited her. Back at the holding facility, Leah goes to the bathroom and opens the paper Shelby gave her. Written on it are the words confirming all her suspicions were true. Leah decides to act smartly and starts calling out for someone outside the room. The investigator appears, and she asks him to open the door because she just needs some fresh air. He takes her outside the building and talks with her to calm her down, showing her a picture of his son to gain her trust. Leah tries to grab his phone and they argue. She pleads with him to at least tell her where they are. He finally admits they're on a remote island off the coast of Brazil, but assures her they'll be leaving soon and that everything will be fine. Leah returns to her room and cleverly wedges a piece of paper in the door to stop it from locking. She keeps her hand pressed against the door until the investigator walks away. Later that night, she waits for all the lights to go out, then quietly opens the door and slips out. Suddenly, the alarm starts blaring. Leah panics, thinking they discovered her escape, and runs through the building in the dark, not knowing where to go. The power flickers until she finds a room to hide in. Then the lights come back on, and Leah realizes she's in a control room filled with surveillance monitors, each screen showing different islands, all resembling the one they were stranded on. She finally understands that everything that happened to them was part of a massive orchestrated experiment, just as she had suspected all along. And with that revelation, the first season of The Wilds comes to an